The night smelled of smoke. It clung to the air like an invisible hand pressing against every throat, forcing every breath to taste of gasoline and ash. The winter wind did little to scatter the flames that leapt behind the row of riot police, painting the sky orange above the city's northern district. The firelight flickered across their transparent shields, throwing back distorted reflections of a restless crowd. Marcus Rivera stood at the edge of the mob, his fists buried deep in the pockets of his worn denim jacket. He was 22, a college dropout, and the son of a factory worker who had lost his job when the plant shut down during the pandemic. He hadn't come here tonight to fight, not really. But when the neighborhood organized to march, when anger boiled into chants, when friends called him to stand with them, he couldn't say no. And now here he was, staring at a wall of police officers in yellow jackets and helmets, their faces hidden behind plastic visors. They looked less like people and more like machines, a line of silent armor holding back the rage of the crowd. "Marcus, come on." A voice tugged at him through the noise. He turned to see Lila, his childhood friend, her eyes wide and alive, clutching a hand-painted sign that read "Justice for All." She was smaller than most in the crowd, but her voice was fierce, carrying over the chants and cries. "Don't just stand there. They need us to hold the line." He swallowed, feeling the heat of the fire behind the police. "I don't know, Lila. Look at them. They're ready for war." Her lips pressed tight. "We didn't start this war. We're just trying to be heard." Across the police line, Officer Daniel Harper adjusted his grip on the shield. He had been on the force for 12 years, long enough to know that protests like these had no neat ending. They started with chants, with songs and banners. Then someone threw a bottle, someone else lit a flare, and soon the city was burning. Tonight, the fire was already lit. Daniel's radio crackled with static and half-shouted orders, but he kept his eyes forward. He scanned the crowd, faces blurred in the smoky dark, some masked, some shouting, some quiet. His stomach twisted when his gaze landed on the younger ones. They couldn't be older than his own daughter, Emily, who was just 16. He thought of her now, probably sitting at the kitchen table, textbooks spread out, waiting for him to come home. He thought of the promise he'd made to his wife years ago, that he would always come back. But standing here, with the flames reflecting in the shields, he wasn't sure he could keep that promise tonight. The crowd surged, voices rising like waves against the shore. "What do we want?" A chant echoed. "Justice." Hundreds shouted back. "When do we want it?" "Now." The words rattled Marcus's chest, filling him with something between courage and fear. He joined in, his voice rough, his throat burning from the smoke. For a brief moment, he felt part of something larger than himself, a tide of voices too loud to be ignored. But then the first bottle flew. It shattered against the pavement in front of the police, spraying glass like glitter in the firelight. The line of officers did not move, but Marcus saw Daniel Harper's shoulders tense. Another bottle, this time flaming, arced through the air and exploded against a street sign, sending sparks into the night. Chaos rippled through the crowd. Some cheered, raising fists. Others flinched back. Marcus grabbed Lila's arm as the noise swelled, sirens wailing in the distance. "Lila, we should go." "No," she snapped, her eyes blazing. "This is our moment, Marcus. If we leave now, nothing changes. Do you want to live your whole life in silence?" Her words cut him, because deep down, he didn't. But he also didn't want to see her hurt. He didn't want to see anyone hurt. And yet, the fire kept burning. From behind the shield, Daniel heard the command in his earpiece, "Hold the line. Do not advance. Do not break." The flames behind him were spreading closer to the old courthouse building. He could feel the heat even through his protective gear. The protesters, faces twisted in the glow, anger, desperation, grief. He had seen this before, too many times. And still, he wondered, had anyone really listened? A flash of movement caught his eye. A young woman, he guessed barely 20, had climbed onto a light post, holding a sign above her head. The words weren't clear from here, but the passion in her cry was unmistakable. He felt something heavy in his chest, an ache that wasn't fear but recognition. Because all these years later, he still remembered the protest he himself had joined as a teenager. He had stood on the other side once, chanting for justice after his own cousin was killed in an accident no one cared to investigate. He remembered the sting of tear gas, the helplessness of being shoved back by faceless officers. And now, he was the faceless officer. Marcus didn't know what compelled him, but as the chants grew louder, as the bottles shattered, as the fire painted the sky, he found himself stepping forward. Just one step, then another. He raised his hands high, palms open, empty. Wait, Marcus. Lila grabbed for him, but he pulled free. He walked toward the police line, his heart hammering like a drum. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him, both protesters and officers. He swallowed his fear and shouted, his voice cracking. "We're not your enemy." For a split second, the world seemed to pause. The chants dimmed, the sirens muffled. Daniel Harper's eyes locked onto Marcus's through the haze, two human beings caught in a storm too big for either of them. And then, a loud bang split the air. A flash grenade exploded nearby, flooding the street with white light and smoke. People screamed. The crowd surged in panic. Marcus stumbled, blinded, his ears ringing. Daniel tightened his grip on the shield, torn between training and instinct, between duty and memory. His voice caught in his throat as he saw the young man fall to the ground just feet away from the police line. "Hold the line," the commander barked through the radio. But Daniel's body moved before his orders could. The night had just begun. And for Marcus, for Lila, for Officer Harper, nothing would ever be the same after what came next. The smoke rolled over the street like a living thing, choking the chants into coughing, scattering the crowd into broken fragments. People shoved and stumbled, some running, some standing their ground. Sirens wailed from every direction, their rising pitch like a chorus of warning. Marcus pressed his palms against the cold asphalt, ears ringing from the blast. His body trembled, not just from fear but from the surge of adrenaline pumping through his veins. He blinked rapidly, eyes watering, until the blurry shapes around him began to form. The police line was just a few feet away. He had never been this close before, close enough to see the scratches on the riot shields, the sweat on the officers' faces behind the visors. And one of them, Officer Daniel Harper, was staring right at him. Daniel's chest constricted as he saw the young man lying in the open, vulnerable, with panic rippling through the crowd around him. Training screamed at him, "Stay in formation. Hold the line. Do not engage." But memory whispered louder, "That could be Emily. That could be your child." He dropped his shield. The sound of it clattering against the pavement drew sharp glances from the officers on either side. "Harper, hold position," his commander barked into the radio. But Daniel was already moving. He pushed through the line, ignoring the shouts in his earpiece, and crouched down beside Marcus. "You need to get up," he said, his voice low, urgent. "It's not safe here." Marcus blinked up at him, chest heaving. I was just trying to." "I know," Daniel interrupted, gripping his arm and helping him to his feet. Their eyes met for the briefest moment, two strangers, but somehow not strangers at all. Lila's scream pierced the chaos as she shoved her way toward them. "Marcus." She grabbed his other arm, pulling him back toward the crowd. Her eyes blazed at the sight of Daniel. "Get away from him. Haven't you done enough?" Daniel froze, words caught in his throat. The weight of her accusation slammed into him harder than any protester's shove ever had. For a moment, he saw himself as she did. Not a man, not a father, not a human being, but a uniform, a wall, an enemy. "I'm not your enemy," he managed to whisper, though he doubted she heard him. Another flash lit the sky. This time it wasn't a grenade but a car, overturned at the edge of the square, catching fire. The crowd roared in panic as flames spread higher, threatening to leap from vehicle to building. Daniel glanced back at his commander, who was shouting orders into the radio, trying to regain control. He knew what would come next: tear gas, rubber bullets, batons. And he knew the crowd would not forget tonight. Marcus staggered between Lila and Daniel, torn in two directions, toward his friend and toward the officer who had just helped him. His throat tightened. "Stop it, both of you. Can't you see? This isn't about us fighting each other." Lila shook her head, eyes shining with tears. "You don't understand, Marcus. They'll never listen unless we fight. And what if fighting just destroys us?" He shot back, voice breaking. "What if it destroys everything?" The words hung heavy between them, swallowed by the roar of the flames. Hours blurred into fragments. Tear gas canisters rolled across the pavement, spewing clouds that made eyes sting and lungs burn. Protesters ran with bottles of milk, pouring them over each other's faces to soothe the pain. Police advanced, shields clashing, boots pounding like drums. In the chaos, Marcus lost sight of Lila. He searched desperately, calling her name, until his throat was raw. Every second stretched like an eternity. Then, through the haze, he saw her, on the steps of the courthouse, clutching her sign even as officers closed in. No. Marcus bolted forward. Daniel saw him run and instinctively followed, his own protective instincts drowning out his orders. They reached the steps together, just as an officer raised his baton toward Lila. Without thinking, Daniel stepped in front of her, shieldless, arms wide. "Stand down," he barked at his fellow officer. "She's unarmed." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the baton lowered. The moment passed, fragile as glass, but it was enough. When dawn finally broke, the fires had burned low. The streets were littered with debris, broken glass, torn banners, the smell of smoke still hanging in the air. Ambulances had come and gone. Most of the protesters had scattered, carrying bruises and anger back to their homes. Marcus sat on the courthouse steps, exhausted, his voice hoarse. Beside him, Lila leaned against his shoulder, her sign battered but still legible, "Justice for all." Across the square, Daniel stood apart from his unit, helmet tucked under his arm, eyes fixed on the rising sun. He knew he would face questions later, about dropping his shield, about defying orders, about protecting the very people he was supposed to contain. But, right now, none of that mattered. Because when his eyes met Marcus's across the empty street, there was no line between them anymore. Just two human beings who had seen the fire in the streets, and chosen, for a moment, not to feed it. Epilogue. Weeks later, the city still bore scars. Burned walls, broken windows, slogans sprayed across concrete. But something else lingered too. Marcus found himself speaking at community meetings, his voice steadier now, his words carrying the weight of what he had seen. Lila kept marching, but she also began organizing food drives, helping families who had lost everything in the chaos. And Daniel. He attended one of those meetings, out of uniform, sitting quietly in the back. He didn't speak, but when Marcus noticed him and nodded in recognition, Daniel felt something he hadn't in years: hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, the fire in the streets had lit something more than destruction. Maybe it had lit the first spark of change.